Hey guys, this is Grok, and I finally got fraps and decided to make my first video about the Guardian because I feel we have a lot of Guardian players and it'll be very helpful. So first up, most important thing on any class, any character, is fashion. You need to look cool. I have my Guardian looking like a character from the Fire Emblem game series. I also have a second set of armor if I don't feel like being a clone. It's pretty cool looking. I encourage you to get your own style and be awesome. Next up, armor stats and runes. You want full Berserker's armor with superior runes of the Scholar. Scholar gives you the most damage on your Guardian. If it's too expensive, you can get Flame Legion runes, which is about 60% from what I read of Scholar runes. Weapons, you want Berserkers as well, with a superior sigil of Knight and Force on your Greatsword for this build, and sigil of Knight and Force on your Sword Focus. This is a great sword and sword focus build. Next, full Berserkers, exotic or ascended jewelry. I was too lazy to get my ascended jewelry out of the bank, so this is just placeholder stuff. Next, for skills, you want Shelter as your heal. It only heals for about half of Signet of Resolve, but you block for 2 seconds while using it, which can protect you from thousands and thousands of damage, which is way better than any other heal you have. For utilities, you want Retreat. It gives you swiftness when running through trash mobs, or Aegis in boss fights, or trash mob fights, which is very useful. Next is Wall of Reflection. Probably Guardian's signature skill, protects you from projectiles, and that does a lot of damage back to some foes and is very useful. And finally, Purging Flames. This removes conditions on allies and is a fire field. Fire fields are awesome because they allow us to stack might, which increases our damage by a lot. If you don't need one of these skills, like say Wall of Reflection, if you are fighting the AC final boss Howling King, you would switch it for Bane Signet to increase your power by a lot. For your elite, you want Renewed Focus. This recharges your virtues, which lets you apply boons and other effects, which is very useful. Sadly, Guardian tomes kinda suck. Next, we'll move on to traits. You want to go 4, 5, 0, 0, 5 for this build. First trait you get in Zeal, you create a symbol when you're under 50% health. This isn't incredibly useful because you don't want to really go under 50% health, but if you do, it's some minor damage applied. Next, you get Fiery Wrath, which is a very strong trait with elementalists and guardians or engineers in your party. There should be a lot of burning up time, if not permanent, giving you a 10% damage increase. Next is Symbolic Exposure. Your symbols apply a vulnerability to foes. Vulnerability is one of the strongest conditions in PvE, increasing your damage up to 25%. This build only has one symbol, so this trait isn't terribly useful, but it's not bad either. Next you get Zealous Blade. Your greatsword deals 5% extra damage and heals you for a small amount when you attack. The heal isn't very strong, so you won't really notice it, but the damage increase is pretty good. Next, you'll take the Radiance Tree. First, you get Justice is Blind. When activating Virtue of Justice, nearby foes are blinded. This skill can be pretty spammable, and this is useful for protecting your group, making them not need to dodge as much. The first trait you'll take is Blind Exposure. Inflicting blindness also applies vulnerability. We went over vulnerability, and Guardian has a lot of blinds, so this is a very strong trait. Renewed Justice is next. It's recharged, or Virtue of Justice is recharged every time you kill a foe. This is really strong in trash fights, letting you apply lots of burning and blindness. Next you'll take Powerful Blades. Your sword does 10% more damage, and that's your main weapon for this build. It's very powerful, 10% extra damage. We take damage modifiers any chance we get, usually, because they're multiplicative, not additional. So if you have two 10% modifiers, it's more like a 21 to 22% increase in damage as compared to 20%. This starts adding up after several modifiers. Lastly, in Radiance, you get Radiant Power. You deal more damage to foes inflicted with conditions. Foes will pretty much always have a condition on them. If they don't, then I don't know. Virtues. First you get Inspired Virtue. This applies several different boons when using your virtue skills. Most notable is the Might from Virtue of Justice. With Renewed Justice recharging it, and Justice is blind, it makes it a very powerful profession skill, being able to spam it during trash mob fights. Lets you stack Might, Vulnerability, Blind, Burning. Next is Unscathed Contender. You deal a massive 20% more damage while under the effects of Aegis. If you're good at keeping blinds up, dodging bosses, and rotating your Aegis, you'll have this modifier up a lot of the time, and you'll really notice the damage increase. Next is Virtue of Retribution. That kind of sucks, so I won't even get into it. Then there's Master of Consecrations. We use 2 consecration skills, so this is useful. It makes them last longer and reduces their recharge. It's very useful with the utility those consecrations provide. Finally, you get Power of the Virtuous. Deal 1% damage for each boon you have on you. Guardian has a lot of boons, and with professions like Warrior, they add some other boons like Fury and Swiftness. This really helps your damage out. That's the main build for Sword, Focus, and Greatsword. The other build is 66002. In Zeal, you'll take the same traits, Fiery Wrath and Zealous Blade, and in the third slot you'll take Amplified Wrath. This increases your burning damage by 33%, and burning is part of your DPS in this build, so this is pretty useful. In Radiance, you take the same 2, and then in the third slot you'll take Right Hand Strength. It's racist towards lefties, but whatever. Your critical hit chance is increased with one-handed weapons. Your sword is a one-handed weapon and the main weapon for this build, so it's very useful, since Guardian doesn't have access to Fury and precision boosts. And in Virtues, you'll take Unscathed Contender or Master of Consecrations. It depends on what the fight requires. But you need a lot of reflex. Take Master of Consecrations for when you use Wall of Reflection. Otherwise, use Unscathed Contender for the damage increase.